Imagine watching the movie Avatar and seriously, non-ironically, cheering and rooting for the sky people. That's what alt-right, MAGA, corporate conservatism sounds like to me. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Featuring an all-new digital robot rock Discotheque Synthetica theme show anthem song performed live to tape and improvisationally composed with animatronic robot rock love for your audio entertainment by DJ Zed. On today's episode of the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Review, a way too late to the party review of the original Avatar, just in time for Avatar: Way of the Water dropping on Disney+, which I guess we'll do a review episode of either later tonight or tomorrow after I watch it. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to you. Hello and namaste. I'm your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And that's DJ Zed on the ultraviolet techno remix live audio improvised live to tape recording of Irrelevant Media Reviews theme song for 2023. Hello, and thank you for tuning in, friends. So let's talk a little Avatar, just in time for the Disney Plus dropping release of the sequel, Avatar: Way of the Water, which I guess I'm actually kind of excited to watch. Where to begin, friends? Where to begin? First of all, I have to admit the following. When it first came out, Avatar, back in the day, and I wish I had the date in front of me. I totally don't. I'm not going to look it up. Whenever it first dropped, ever so many years ago, I really kind of wasn't into it. I don't know why. I was feeling, I guess, a bit jaded at the time in general, and maybe specifically about that. It kind of felt like it felt like an amalgamation of a lot of Dancing with Wolves, Pocahontas, indigenous people tropes to me. But I was feeling really jaded and cynical, whatever year that was, if I remember correctly. And what I can assure you now is that with time and a bit of distance, because I had not watched it again since whenever I first watched it when it first came out, watching it again yesterday, I realized maybe in my initial assessment of it personally, I'd been a bit too jaded and too dismissive of it. One of the weird ironies about it was that, now those of you who are old school listeners might remember that I have this peculiarity about media. I can watch a movie and then completely forget what the F goes on in it. Like, it'll just be gone. I'll remember that I liked it. I might remember some weird continuity issues, either really excellent work of continuity or special effects or some kind of, editing thing, or I'll completely, or I'll remember something, like a moment, but I'll be kind of lost on like what actually happens. But not in a bad way. in a I look forward to watching it again kind of way. When it comes to like weird things that stand out, like some of the weird, for example, I haven't done a review episode. There's so much backlog, folks. I keep watching more content and then thinking I need to do an IRM, right? Irrelevant Media Review. That's the new acronym. I had to trim the T because I decided to go with a standardized 3-letter acronym for every special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. GMT, Good Morning Drumtopia. IRM, Irrelevant Media Reviews. But I really missed the totally. I know that my titles tend to be excessively long, but there's a reason, and I like the weird play on words. Anyways, here's a totally irrelevant thing about, for this episode especially, since it's not even from this movie. But I will probably forget the nuanced details of what happens in that Thor movie. Not Thor, sorry. It's Hemsworth. That Chris Hemsworth's movie, Extraction. I recently watched it. But one impression or one reality about it that will probably like stick really sharp in my mind is that they were really playing with what to me felt like really innovative, impossible camera action work. Like action camera craziness. There was, and I love me some excellently well-planned, well-executed cinematography and camera work. I mean, it's a moving camera medium. And there's something to be said about choices where like the camera's really still, or it's a one long, really nuanced but straightforward, unedited, uncut shot, etc. They did something that I know is physically impossible. One of the first big action sequences after you get through the character backstory and development stuff is just full of impossible. It's like one long act. It's like the first thing, and they get in a car and they're being chased, and I already forget why, who is chasing him and why, and if it's before or after the kid, he finds the kid, or I don't remember. But there's a really solid, intense sequence where it's obviously physically impossible, where it feels like it's one long, continuous take, right? And those are awesome. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's just something really interesting, subtle, but fascinating about a long take in a film that has no jump cuts and is smooth and continuous and captures what's going on without, cutting to this other character or cutting away from a wide shot to a short to an up close shot, right? And one of the reasons that it's fascinating at an intellectual level when a movie does this is because to achieve that, at least back in the day, in pre CGI, pre mocap, pre automated camera machine dolly work era, back in the day, like if you've never seen The Party, go watch that movie. That's a serious, genuine, 100% multiple thumbs up a film nerd endorsement on my part. I should probably do a whole thing. Now, it hasn't aged as well as it could have. There's obviously some cultural appropriation issues, etc., but what's his name? The original Pink Panther, Peter Sellers. His name almost totally blanked out, but there it is. Peter Sellers. He was the Charlie Chaplin of that era, okay? Physical comic genius. And in The Party, which is mostly about a Hollywood industry party, where this extra gets accidentally, and I don't mean to spoiler it, but this Peter Sellers' character is a sort of struggling actor who's doing a lot of extra work and small bit parts, background parts, etc. And his name accidentally ends up on a really exclusive invite list to a party in the Hollywood Hills, right? Somewhere deep in industry country. Producers, actors, celebrities, etc. There's in the big intro to the party itself when he arrives, there is a prolonged, I don't know how long it is, and I don't want to say too many more minutes than it actually is, but remember just being like, wow, that last like 7.5, 10-minute, whatever it was, it might have been 15 minutes long. My first impulse was like a 20-minute idea, but I doubt it's that long. But it's a remarkably long take that you can just tell there's no edits. And if they faked it, kudos to them because it looks solid. And back in the day, it was really hard to fake because they were literally cutting the cellophane or the celluloid, right? They were literally cutting the strips of film to do jump cuts and crossfade. Any of that kind of stuff was a physical cut. Whether there was a crossfade or a special thing or blah, blah, blah. It was still, you were literally editing the actual like raw negatives of the film. So presumably, and I swear I think I've seen some documentary where they talk about this take and it's real. It isn't like, to do that, you have to spend weeks rehearsing, I would presume. Especially because this is a big party scene in a big house and a big set that you cannot tell is a set, right? I don't think they filmed in a real house. But everything is unbroken, the action is continuous, the camera moves from place to place, from mark to mark, and you never see, the tricks. You never see the crew. You never see lighting equipment. You never see, the backside of the fake walls. You never see a glitch, an accident, a mistake, unless it's meant to be there. And there's a few of them in that movie. Anyways, I digress. Talk about irrelevant media reviews right there. We're talking about Avatar. I reel it back. The really awesome thing about Extraction 1, and I am kind of looking forward to seeing Extraction 2, is that they achieved that vibe, which is now, of course, extra crazy feeling because there's stuff that is physically impossible. Physically impossible. Massive leaps off buildings, and then the camera slams through an open window into the car, revolves around the center of the car to capture everyone in the car, and then flies out of the car to take a close-up of the vehicle following, stuff like that. It was just mind-bogglingly cool. Now, the film special effects nerd part of my brain knew that was physically impossible, and that they had to have been doing lots of CGI work and coordinated, what do you call that? The hydraulic automated camera controls. There's a name for that. Anyways, kudos to them. All right, reeling it back. So, innovation in film, right? I'm obviously late to the party, and I can't add anything new to the accolades that have already been laid upon the film awards and reviews and critiques. It is gorgeous. Avatar. Right? It's beautiful. And I have to confess to you guys something really awkward. When I sat down yesterday to watch it, I wasn't in the mood. I was in a funk yesterday. I wasn't feeling like working on any of my content creation projects, which is the real life struggle bus, folks. There's nothing weirder and more frustrating for a content creator to wake up and not want to build or create or work on any of your content, right? Like just trying to and feeling like, I don't want to write any short stories. I don't want to doodle any doodles. I don't want to play any live stream games. I don't want to make a podcast episodes. It was just a rough day in that regard. And it wasn't that like I want to do these things, right? Like my conscious mind. There was something going on in my body mind, in my subconscious, in the parts of me that I can't really explain with words. But my body was having none of it. Anyways, long story short, the closest I got to working on content creation was remembering that I had... Did I do this yesterday? That might have been at some point yesterday. Remembering that I did have like a really random recording of my thoughts about Succession and uploading that. And then saying, remembering, again, realizing that Avatar 2 was dropping relatively soon, looking it up and going, smack, it's tomorrow, or aka today, and kind of forcing myself to sit down and watch Avatar 1 so that A, I'd be prepared, right? And B, if I felt inspired, I would take some notes or whatever, or audio record something and make a totally irrelevant media review episode. Speaking of which, a little bit of news before we get really into the nuts and bolts about like what I think about the movie Avatar. Hello and welcome to the new spin-off era of the Almost Daily Zencast and its many sub-segments. IRM, Irrelevant Media Reviews, is now available as its own podcast show over on Sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo. Now, many people are listening on one of the distribution platforms that Sprecher distributes to. So, and I haven't updated all the spin-off shows and submitted them all to those distribution platforms. So you'll forgive me for that. Oh, and I totally just set this. I meant to set this to drop in Almost Daily Zencast, and instead I think it's dropping in Irrelevant Media Reviews. I don't remember. I'll have to double check. But at any rate, welcome to the show in its new reorganized format. You'll now be able to find Cannabis Talk in its own show space. GMT will be all cohesively one thing. IRM, etc., etc., etc. So if you want to take a deep dive into one of the special segments of the Almost Daily Zencast, you won't have to go digging through one long, endless feed. You can now click through to Sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo and listen to just the episodes of the special segment you wanna dive into. And for those of you, I'm not saying that if you're listening to my podcast on GeoSavan or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts that you have to abandon your favorite podcast player to come over to Sprecher.com. You don't have to. I will, in the not-too-distant future, be catching up with all that behind-the-scenes work and submitting each of the special spin-off segments for distribution in all of the podcast platforms that Sprecher.com distributes to. So please stay tuned. You should be, discovering those relatively soon. I just need to do a little bit of cleanup work on all the things, make sure all the settings and all the meta information is ready to rock and roll before we do that. Okay, let's cleanse the palate, listen to a little bit of DJ Zed, and then we'll get into a little bit of a deeper dive talking about Avatar, the original movie, and also whatever else about movies drops into my head. Here is Bending Time Zones Permitting, a DJ Zed live-to-tape audio performance of the Remix Live Chalk Dinosaur Audio Asset Pack. And by the way, shout out and many thanks to Remix Live. What's the other one called? All the other apps I use. Thanks for being you guys, and for helping a struggling robot rock digital engineer create soundscapes for the media hustle. We'll be right back in just a second, but in the meantime, if you haven't watched Avatar, the first in what is now a 2-movie series, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's talk of a third already in development or maybe in simultaneous production, take this moment now to remind yourself of the movie and the characters and whatnot. I'll probably be all over the place in terms of character names and whatnot, but you help me out by remembering what you can remember about the movie. Is that it was super weird for me I didn't like it. I almost felt the CGI didn't look good. I remember watching it the first time and thinking, What the F? Sigourney Weaver's blue avatar Smurf face looks so weird to me. But I think I was also having a bit of like a anti-CGI vibe still. I've come full circle there though now. Like I really dig when CGI is executed well. Alright, friends, Avatar. It got to me this time around. It really got to me this time around. And I don't know if that's got more to do with my evolving and deepening appreciation for CGI as a special effects tool. Obviously, there's some scary things about CGI and the general like digital creation tools, especially things like deepfake and all that. We can do a whole episode about the mixed feelings I have about the idea of being able to digitize an actor's image and sound and behavioral patterns and then never needing to actually use that actor ever again. I have some really mixed feelings about that. Not that this is a big thing here, although clearly Avatar was one of those movies that wasn't just groundbreakingly beautiful in its end result, but literally broke new ground in the development of the technology behind the scenes. So it took me a while to like really appreciate that, I think. And I think at the time I didn't like the color palette. Like it was all neon and I wasn't into it. And one of the other things I think that has evolved for me is the context, the socio-political context of our real life. Now, why does that matter? Film is art. Sure, not every movie achieves that. Not every movie wants to achieve that. But cinema, true film, is art. And art, either intentionally or sort of organically, just by existing, interacts with, in our minds, right? Interacts with the socioeconomical political context of the time frame in which a viewer watches it. Movies will hit different depending on your level of awareness of the socio-political economical context, both of the time frame when the creator creates it, whoever the creator or creators might be of a particular project, and also the time frame in which you watch it as a viewer. A really great example for me is the movie Brazil. If you've never seen Terry Gilliam's Brazil, make time to go watch that a few times. Not only do the practical, real-world, there's zero CGI in that movie to the best of my understanding. Not even computer-aided composition, compositing and stuff, which is, one of those tools it was developing before full-blown CGI. Oh, not true. They kind of all developed together, but it was being used really effectively before CGI characters really got perfected in terms of their visual quality and their acting ability or their expressivity. So images were being composited by hand, right? You'd film the actors, you'd film a piece of scenery, you'd film some infrastructure, scale models or whatever, and then the editing team would have to composite those different images manually, which means fucking with and editing and rear view projection, and there's a myriad of techniques that were fascinating and useful and weird but ultimately replaced by computer aided processes. Obviously everyone's familiar with green screen and blue screen. Now it's like default. In fact, there are entire movies in which almost everything is filmed in front of either a blue or green screen. Whatchamahoozle, Captain of Tomorrow comes to mind. There's and the Superman, the DC movies, etc. But I digress. My thoughts and stuff are spiraling into tangents instead of drilling deeper into the movie. Watching it again yesterday, I had a weird experience, which was like I despite the fact of what I said earlier about like forgetting what happens in a movie, when in the moments before I press play, the movie or big chunks of it sort of just flashed before my mind's eye. Like I went, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, I totally remember this, and I remember that, and I was like, do I really need to watch this? And the part of me that was like, it's kind of late already. The insomniac in me was just like, yeah, stay up and watch it. And the tired, exhausted, sleep deprived part of me was like, no, don't watch it, dude. Just go to bed. The insomniac one, mostly because the film enthusiast was like, oh wait, I remember big chunks, but I also don't remember other big chunks and how it. I didn't remember how it ended, right? I couldn't remember how it ended, and that'll always make me want to watch a movie again. If I have, especially if I have mixed feelings about it, I'll be like, well, how the fuck did it end? I don't remember how the F it ends. Let's go watch it again just to see if my positive or negative or mixed vibes about it are still the same or if things are evolved. And I got to give everyone involved this credit. It stands the test of time. That movie, Avatar, has aged so much better than so many movies from the same era or just before. So many things are popping into my head right now. I love me some Sigourney Weaver, and I think I didn't appreciate her character very much, and what goes on, where her trajectory goes, and why things happen the way they do. And by the way, friends. Totally, I've been sort of unsure of how to handle doing media reviews in regards to the spoiler situation, and I'm from before I grew up with movies and talking about movies and discussing movies with friends and family from before, and believe it or not, this is real, before the hyper normalization of the spoiler alert concept. When I watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in a movie theater, there wasn't anybody saying, no spoilers. We all just talked about it to whatever degree we wanted to talk about it. That cultural awareness just hadn't developed yet. And I respect those who don't want movies ruined, by getting spoilers. So I appreciate spoilers. But I'm also, because I'm of that era where it just wasn't a thing, I don't have yet, and I'm sure I can get better at this, I don't have the ingrained habitual behavior of including spoiler alert disclaimers in my workflow. Because I'm thinking right now, I've been thinking about this on and off forever as I've been approaching the spin-off moment of taking IRM and moving it into its own show container over on Sprecher.com. That's the technical terminology they use, show container, which kind of makes sense. It just sounds weird, but it sounds weird because it's you know that they came up with it in their native language over there, because I think this is a German company. Anyways, I digress. I could be wrong. The word Sprecher, Spreaker, is German for speaker, like a speaker box, like a boombox speaker. Anyways, reeling it back. Spoiler alert. The way the thing that happens with Sigourney Weaver's character at the end used to annoy me. When I first watched it, I was annoyed. But I didn't connect the dots to the reality, or to some dialogue that happens a little bit later. So here's a spoiler alert. She dies, right? If you didn't want to hear that, if you didn't know that, I mean, how have you not watched Avatar yet? It's been out for how long? And the new one has been out in theaters for how long? And it's about to drop on Disney Plus, or just dropped on Disney Plus today. So she dies, but in a really beautiful ceremonial moment, which is gorgeous, by the way. I rediscovered an appreciation for the representation of Aboriginal, Indigenous, tribal living in this sci-fi movie. Which was, at the time when I first watched it, I just didn't connect with it. It just felt really weird, and it felt very much like, I don't know, like cultural appropriation, like white people sci-fi about what space alien tribal Aboriginal people might be like. But I don't know. I was much younger then, and like I said, I was in a weird, jaded place at the time, from what I can recall in my sense memory about my context then. So she dies, and there's this beautiful ceremony in which they try really earnestly not to heal her with voodoo magic, but to transfer her consciousness. And this is the part that I didn't really appreciate about the film overall at the time. Transfer her consciousness with the bioelectrical mechanical realities of the organic relationship they have to nature and energy, consciousness, and physical bodies, right? Even though I was well into my journey of being an enthusiast of all kinds of spiritual traditions and transcendental thinking, and I was already hippy dippy new age, although I categorically reject all of those labels, but just to give it a shorthand for people to, I was already into that, right? But I guess I didn't appreciate the simplistic way in which they handled all of that in the movie. The Navajo people don't talk about it, right? I mean, they do talk about it, but they talk about it in really simple terms. They don't over-explain it. And that's a mental issue. I have that problem. I over-explain everything. Listen to my podcast, right? You are listening to my podcast, in part maybe because you enjoy the weird, spirally, crazy, chaotic way in which I over-explain stuff. And Sigourney Weaver tries to explain the transcendental, mystic, biomechanical realities of what she's slowly discovering and trying to understand purely in materialist scientific terms about this planet, about the people, and about their relationship to what? The mother. The mother. And it hit me really strongly yesterday when I watched, and I'm really glad I didn't start to fall asleep, because it's an epic long movie. That's 2 hours and 45 minutes or so, something like that. That's a 3-hour movie. And I love it when a 3-hour movie is really well done and is really engaging, whether it's slow paced, fast paced, whatever it is. Like Meet Joe Black. Here's another genuine endorsement. Now, a lot of people think that movie's boring, but you got to just dial out your attention span and really just let your perception absorb the nuances. But I digress. So the main character, whose name I cannot recall, even though I can sort of almost hear the tribal elders saying Jake Sully. There it is. I can like see the scene where they say his name for the first time, and they're like, "How do you pronounce this?" So Jake, right? It's Jake, right? Jake Sully, I think. Or am I confusing some other movie? I don't know. Let's just use that name for now, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. He's obviously on a journey of realization, right? He comes in and he's literally a jarhead, right? He says he comes from the jarhead tribe. He's a company man. He's here, like he describes himself in those terms quite explicitly in the beginning of the movie. One of the things I underestimate or undervalued in my original release timeframe viewing of it was how well his narrative works. His narration of the film really, 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 really works. Especially once it's understood that it's couched in the video diary scientific journaling thing that he's doing. So he has a scene after Sigourney Weaver's character dies where he's like in his avatar body. And I remember thinking when they have that beautiful ceremony and they try to save Sigourney Weaver's character by transferring her consciousness using bioorganic, naturally occurring like systems in their environment, right? That's mind-boggling that they live in that close of a relationship with nature that they can commune with other organisms using organic telecommunication networking systems, right? And I remember the very first time I saw the sequence of the Navajo people showing Jake how to use the weird little whatever those tendrils that come out of his out of their hair. Like I thought that was dumb. I was being dumb when I first saw that. That's although it looks a little visually weird, it also makes perfect sense. I had never had long hair before at that point in my life. I'd never grown my hair out long enough to have a long braided ponytail or whatever you call that. And also I wasn't connecting with the notion that even though I knew it in my mind, all things on Earth are genetically interrelated. Okay, folks? Let's draw parallels to our own reality. So they just take that to another extreme that we just don't have access to here. But all the human genome shares 75% genetic identical ingredients with cabbage. Now that you can just laugh that off, or you can dismiss it as meaningless coincidence or as meaningless statistical inevitability. But what I find is deeply profound about this reality is that it clearly indicates that all genomes of all life forms are interrelated because they must come from a common ancestral origin. Now, reeling it back to this moment where they try to transfer her consciousness, I was like confused and annoyed and didn't appreciate it back in the day because I didn't understand what they were trying to reveal and how it helps out and has a significant plot like twist towards the, in the big climactic battle at the end. Right? Spoiler alert. There's a great big fight at the end of the thing because the evil corporate tyrants that are here just to strip the planet of its mineral wealth. And we can have a whole extra episode about that pin on the corkboard. But I'll bring it full circle in a hot second. She fails. The ceremony fails. She doesn't get to live in her new in the avatar body, which she had been technologically transferring her consciousness to temporarily, remotely, right? That's what those little coffin-like boxes that they get into are all about. Some technology that they manufactured to do what the Navai people can do organically, because of how in tune and in communion with their natural surroundings they have evolved. But what I missed, what I didn't connect the dots about, is that she didn't just disappear. Her consciousness merged with the collective pool of spirit that all of these natural systems, and she explains it in the movie, and she explains it in biomechanical technical terminology, correlating it to computer technology, right? Now here's the fun, mind-blowing part. Something I was aware of way back when the movie first came out, from long before the movie came out, but that it didn't factor in my appreciation for the film. The electrobiological networking of living organisms is observable here on your planet, folks. I used to use this information to sort of just antagonize and get under the skin of militant vegetarians and vegans. Militant vegetarians and vegans diet shame, judge, and persecute anyone who eats animal flesh. Now, we can have a whole multiple episode series discussion about the us versus them tug of war between the self-righteousness of plant-based diets and the problematic issues of more omnivore or meat-based diets, and the middle path between those two. Put a pin on the corkboard. But my real quick bottom line is ideology about diet is missing the point. It's the food systems that are toxic. And the fact that we've distanced ourselves at an individual and collective place with our spiritual relationship to whatever we eat. Instead of arguing about which diet is most righteous or most correct or most evolutionarily appropriate, we must be redefining and revolutionarily changing our relationship at a spiritual and intellectual level with our food. Whatever the food is. Pin on the corkboard. I've talked about it before in the podcast. I'm sure I got to come back full circle and do a whole special episode about that. Okay, so I didn't appreciate any of those things. And spoiler alert, Sigourney Weaver, although we never hear her speak again, plays a pivotal role in that final battle. Because if she hadn't failed to transfer into the cloned, biologically engineered avatar body that is half Navai and half, human, she would not have been able to answer Jake Sully's prayer or help the mother. I forget the name of the mother deity, but we might as well call her Gaia because that's what it represents in the movie. Duh. She helps the planetary consciousness understand the problem, right? In a sort of behind-the-scenes way. Jake Sully prays right before the big fight scene, and his girlfriend, I forget her name. I can't, and even if I could remember it, I don't think I could pronounce it. She informs him that the mother spirit does not take sides, right? She just protects the balance of life. And there we get to the deep cut, profound, if we're going to see a message in this movie, and people can argue about whether or not films and their creators are trying to deliver a positive message or a misleading message, etc., etc. Trust me, one of the pins on the corkboard is one of the clusters, because they cluster like galactic clusters in the Millennium Run model of the universe. If you don't know what the Millennium Run is, go look that shit up. And I'm not talking about Star Wars. It's the Planck Institute 3D model of all visible points in space, points of light. That's a whole nother episode's worth of discussion. What was I saying about what was the cluster I was trying to talk about? Snap! I hate it when I get so spirally. I totally derail and snap a branch of thought off and forget what I was saying. Gaia. Okay. I think. Ideology, etc. And whether or not there's a good mission. If we can see or project, and in this instance, when it comes to art, projection is not inherently problematic. When it comes to public discourse, when it comes to argumentation and debate for the benefit of advancement of collective understanding, projection's usually problematic because most people projecting are projecting negative and sometimes, very often, false assumptions onto others based on biased, conditional thinking. But when it comes to art is designed to be projected on, right? Not just, and it's not a one-way street. Art is designed to stimulate the mind and inspire it to seek out patterns and then project perceptual things onto it when it's done right. I would argue. But again, pins on the corkboard. We could discuss that for days. If we can see, if I could argue for a message in Avatar other than corporate profiteering bad, tribal living good, which is one really simplistic and reductionist way to analyze the movie, it's that the problem isn't that corporate colonization is inherently bad, but rather that the root cause of toxicity behind corporate colonization is rooted in the unfortunate disconnection, the disconnect that we have created for ourselves as people from our organic context, from the living mother womb that gives birth to us and all other life. Pin on the corkboard about words matter and the terminology matrix. If you know, you know where I stand on that. If you don't, there's a very recent episode, and I've discussed it before in various episodes on the podcast. Go check it out. Bottom line, though, everybody be using the word matrix wrong. If you're talking about hacking your way out of the matrix, you're not doing yourself or the human species any favors. You mean to say liberate yourself from man-made ideology. But you're saying something else entirely, my friends. If you're not understanding the original, root, aboriginal, tribal, ancient, spiritual definition of the term matrix. See the pin on the corkboard in the most recent episode, Words Matter. I think that's what it's called. It's very recent, and it should be in the main feed for the Almost Daily Zencast. Or maybe it's in today's Nugget of Zen. I don't remember. But I digress. That's what this movie brings an opportunity to go, oh, snap, about. By decontextualizing it and putting in a science fiction, action, adventure setting on another planet dealing with aliens, right? But it's a blatant critique of colonization groupthink. We are the righteous good guys, and we have the right to take what we want, and it's those dirty, flea-bitten, tree-dwelling, ignorant, and unworthy others that we dehumanize and refuse to see as people with equal rights as our own, they don't deserve what they've got. We're going to take it from them, and if they stand in our way, we will butcher them. That's the hard pill to swallow, that a lot of people in our world today, especially the further towards the alt-right, extreme right end of the ideological spectrum, they lean towards, refuse to see. I wrote the following statement here last night, and I was thinking about posting it on social media, but I saved it because I knew that it was overly worded and incomplete. And then, a much snappier, shorter version that kind of says the same thing, but in totally different wording came to me at the top of this episode. And I need to add that to this thing. But imagine watching the movie Avatar and cheering for the mass murdering, military-industrial complex colonizers here to literally rip this planet to shreds and butcher anyone that stands in their way purely for profiteering's sake. The hard pill to swallow is that is the core problem with our postmodern society. We are living in the legacy after effects of that kind of brutal, destructive, abusive, toxic, white, oftentimes religiously motivated, ideologically, let's put it this way, ideologically motivated colonization and profiteering. Okay? So that's not the thing I was going to read. Here's the thing I was going to read. Quote, and I'm quoting myself from a notepad entry from yesterday. Quote, imagine watching the movie Avatar and irrationally believing that your political party is represented by the Navai people and the other party that you don't like are the evil corporate profiteers, whilst everyone in the other political party thinks the exact opposite. When in reality, we, the human species, are all actually just the humans in the movie. Except for our tribal Aboriginal brothers and sisters that are the Navai. But almost all of us, and increasingly the children of Aboriginal tribes, because we hijacked their cultures, stole their lands, and for what? Abusive, toxic, meaningless profiteering. And I'm obviously interjecting a bunch of stuff that I didn't write yesterday because I'm totally off the rails here. When in reality, we are all actually the humans in the movie. All of us are, except for those who are truly tribal and Aboriginal in their mode of living, all of us are caught up in a system of a collective pursuit for profit that we did not create personally. We inherited from our ancestors, but are totally dependent on. Most of us blinded by politics and ideology, blinded to the immorality of what we have been doing to Mother Nature for the past century and a half, 2 centuries. This is a hard pill to swallow, folks, but the human species is destroying itself by destroying the mother matrix that is planet Earth and the living ecosystems that were originally sustaining us. And we're not going to solve that problem by butchering ourselves more and butchering Mother Nature more and then exporting this ideology to a different planet. We are not. If anything, and here's what can be said about what is represented in the Avatar. The moment we go, as the human species, to another planet, we become the evil empire, like in Star Wars, right? We become the Borg. like in Star Trek, even if we're not robots yet. Although obviously that might be part of the whole process, because it might seem to be technologically required for the human body to survive such long distance journeys. Pins on the corkboard, both in past episodes and, of course, obviously upcoming future episodes. We're going to want to talk about that some more. The moment we export our toxic, polluting, destructive, profit-motivated, human-made-up ideological constructs to another planet, we are undeniably the evil, invading alien species. And we will be met with resistance. So imagine watching this movie and thinking your imaginary revolution, your imaginary political revolution that you're foaming at the mouth to have, is equivalent to the struggle of the Navai. I call malarkey on that bullshit. Especially, the civil war that the right-wingers want to have. Pins on the corkboard. Talked about it in the past here on the podcast. We'll talk about it for sure more in future episodes. Now, one of the things that I still think is a tragedy is that in movies like this, the only solution is war. Right? I don't know what's going to happen in Avatar 2, The Way of the Water, but it's the one trope that still does hit me the wrong way or rub me the wrong way about this and many other movies. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy action-adventure, shoot-'em-up movies. I don't have a problem with it. What I have a problem with is when we don't utilize our intellectual capacities to understand that the fantasy of endless butchering should only be that, because violence doesn't really solve anything. Case in point, if violence actually solved things, then there wouldn't be an Avatar 2, would there? It'd be done. It'd be solved. The only thing self-defense, and I always hear this, both in my imagination and in real conversations online and in the real world, in face-to-face, but violence stops the evil aggressor. Sure. Self-defense. I'm never pooping on self-defense. Someone's coming at you with a knife, defend yourself. Or be like Christ and let them kill you. Now, Christians don't like that. But that's a whole pin on the corkboard. Already talked about it. Can talk about it again. Going to drop my truth bomb right here. If Christ were here today, he would be standing up to and fighting against in nonviolent protest and political discourse, because he's not an ideologue. Never was, right? There should be no Christian ideology, yo. Because he was a pacifist, he was a healer, and he was teaching us spiritual practices, tangible spiritual healing practices. And he would be, I feel fairly certain, confidently certain, that he would be agreeing with and or more eloquently stating the case that violence, even self-defense violence, does not actually solve any problems. If it did, there wouldn't be an Avatar 2. If it did, there wouldn't have been a World War II. If it did, right here, right now, in the world we live in, we would be free of problems. 10,000 years worth of using violence to solve problems. Yes, self-defense terminates aggressive, violent action, which is good if you don't want to suffer the pain of allowing aggressive, violent action towards you. But curiously, what did Jesus do when the Romans came to capture him? He didn't put up a fight. Yes, people always point to the thing that he tells his followers to buy swords. But then they ignore the next bit, which is he said, yeah, get your swords. The Romans are coming. And then when the Romans come, he says, put your swords down, put them away, turn them into plowshares. And he allows the Romans to capture him. He allows the Romans to kill him. And that was his message to the world. That whilst it is natural to defend oneself against a violent aggressor in order to survive, it is unnatural to blindly believe that violence solves every problem. If a bear is charging at you, and you cannot negotiate with it in its territorial standoff eye contact language, then you might have to defend yourself against its claws. And you might have to find a way to kill it. Especially if it's rabid, starving, and desperate for food. Eat or be eaten, right? The thing is, we are not meant to live like that. We are meant to learn and transcend living like that. But our socioeconomical, political, ideological constructs, which is what people mean when they misuse the term matrix. And we need a new label, a different label, because my label that I just used is way too long and no one wants to use it. And it's catchy and kitschy and cute because of the movies. Thank you, Keanu Reeves, and everybody involved with that series, to use the term matrix. But the matrix is the mother womb of the living goddess that is giving birth to us. So we got to clarify our language and our understanding of the language, or else we are undermining our own efforts to transcend the ideological constructs that got us here. And I think deep down, that's the vibe that Avatar is trying to communicate. Maybe I'm projecting a little, but that's what art is for. And that's what I got to say about Avatar 1. Stay tuned, because in the not-too-distant future, I will be dropping my review of Avatar 2. This was less a review of the movie in and of itself and more a discussion about my reaction to the movie. So on technical terms, the effects stand up. They were not just beautiful in the day. I realized I wasn't prepared for the chosen design aesthetic. It just wasn't up my alley. But I realized in letting myself just watch it yesterday, it is beautifully executed. All of it makes sense. There wasn't anything about it that I was like, that's dumb. And there usually is in sci-fi, special effects. There's usually something I'm like, well, that was silly. That didn't work for me. All of it looks plausible and believable and interesting and beautiful, except for maybe the whirling wings on those little glowing dragonflies. I don't know how those work. Like, that didn't make sense to my mind that understands how biological bodies move. But maybe if I understood it better, it might, right? But I digress. My brain is bringing up, for contrast, some of the special effects and or design choices in Indiana Jones that just don't make any sense. Like when he gets to the hidden map room in whichever movie that was. What movie is it when he's looking? They're looking for the what? That's what the title is. They're looking for not the Torah. They're looking for the Ten Commandments thing. I can't remember for the life of me what that box is called, but they're looking for the thing with the Ten Commandments in it. And he's trying to escape the map room that he's been locked in. And there's all these snakes, like from the beginning of that whole sequence. How do the snakes survive? Are these snakes, are they just randomly there? Or was the room designed to have them in there in perpetuity by the ancients, whoever put it there in the first place? What do they eat? Where do they drink? How do they all survive just tumbling around each other, etc.? right? Also, none of the booby traps in any of the Indiana Jones movies, especially that one that's triggered by light, none of them make any fucking sense. I still love the series. I'm going to do an Indiana Jones episode because obviously the new Dial of Destiny is coming out soon. But reeling it back, digressing. I gotta say, I'm actually really excited to see Avatar 2 now with my newly invigorated appreciation for Avatar 1. If you haven't seen Avatar 1, go watch it. And if you have seen Avatar 1 and you think you identify with the Na'vi people, I humbly encourage you to do some serious thinking about how much more we really are, even myself. Although because I'm not living out in the forest, in tribal organic relationship with nature. If I tried to do that tomorrow, I would surely not succeed. And I think it's foolish to think we can just rip the system down and just let people sort it out. It took us multiple generations and several hundred years to build up the artificial system that we now rely on that disconnects us from our living, spiritual, organic relationship with Mother Gaia. Everybody out there advocating for just ripping the system apart, burning it down to the ground and going, yay! All you preppers and stuff, you're not thinking it out all the way through. I don't think, but that's a whole nother pin on the corkboard. We can do a whole discussion about that. I kind of feel like I've run out of words. So let's plop on a little DJ Zed music to play us out. Thank you, as always, my friends, for listening. Here is Driving Depth Subconscious, a driving techno song 101 remix live to tape audio asset engineering performance by DJ Zed. And let's, as we play that out, contemplate, the realities of our situation here. We are destroying ourselves. The more we pave over the living planet that gives birth to life, the closer to the brink of extinction we push ourselves. I want to add a few final words and closing thoughts. Shout out to everyone involved in Avatar. Excellent work. It stands up to the test of time. It was groundbreaking when it came out. It was technologically groundbreaking and innovative and changed the film industry. Some might say for better, many would argue for worse. Maybe a mixed bag of both, usually is. But bravo. It really managed to impress me, make me laugh, make me reconsider my assumptions and my biases, make me feel emotion. It made me feel the tragedy of the loss on both sides, right? One of the things we always do in movies is, although Star Wars is a bit of a fluke because everyone loves the dark side, and, there's fans of the evil empire and that's fine. I'm not judging. I'm just saying one of the things that's easy to do, and this is this is much more easily exemplified in Nazi movies. We dehumanize the bad guys. We objectify them. We turn them into robots. We turn them into evil demons. But thereby, by the grace of whatever divine light there is, could we all go? Because no bad guy in the history of human bad guys has ever believed themselves to be the bad guy. The bad guys always believe they are the righteous chosen ones, and that everyone else is the bad guy. And that, my friends, isn't just delusional rationalization. That right there is at the core of this ego problem that we suffer, that requires not mutual annihilation to solve it, but individual and collective species-wide inclusive healing. Stay tuned for more totally irrelevant media reviews. I kind of can't say it without the word totally. I keep trying to say irrelevant media reviews and it just sounds incomplete. So I'm gonna keep calling it that because it just rolls off the tongue better. But I'm committed to IRM as the actual text acronym. Stay tuned for more totally irrelevant media review episodes dropping in the not too distant future. There's a huge backlog of films and TV shows I want to comment on, and of course, there's a bunch more coming down the pipeline, despite the fact that there's now, I think, or not quite yet, but there's the writer's strike going on, and the actors union has just voted to approve preemptively a strike should their negotiations fail. And by the way, I just want to take this moment to say much love and respect and admiration and support to the writers on strike as an aspiring writer who would love to see my universe of worlds and characters grow into a book series and a movie series and a TV series and a video game series. I stand in solidarity with their strike. Everyone deserves to get paid not just a reasonable wage, but a thriving wage. And that opens up a can of worms, discussion about the wealth inequality, et cetera, and we'll have to bring that discussion full circle. I've talked about it, obviously, in past episodes for various reasons, because it's interwoven to and interconnected to just about everything going on in our society. And I'm sure we'll come full circle and talk about it again in future episodes. But so I stand also in solidarity with the Actors Union, and I will always speak up and question the irrational hyper-vilification of everyone involved in entire industries by dissociative delusional conspiracy theory that is almost always engineered to create intractable, unresolvable emotional conflict. Pin on the cardboard. The Almost Daily Zencast and its various special subsegments are a production of C-Tag Studios, the totally imaginary production company that exists entirely in my mind, established, created, and co-founded by me, myself, and I, and our imaginary sidekick, DJ Zed. Thank you for listening. Go have a groovy day. Be good human beings to each other out there in the real world and on the internet. Ciao for now. Thank you for your support and listenership.